All right, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is Mr. Madrid from the Mr. Madrid Show, and today we have a very special guest. This is a gentleman that I really admire. It's one of my friend's father, who I met years ago. And before you guys know I talk a lot. But before going into the actual conversation, he is a man's man, somebody who I really admire, somebody who has been there for their family, who's been an entrepreneur, who's a professional at that. And I could keep going, but let's go ahead and get him in here and introduce him. This is Mr. Raphael Luis Vasquez. Welcome, Raphael, to the show. Thank you for coming on, sir.
Well, thank you for inviting me here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you. And real quick, just for the audience, for the people that view or listen to this was something that was in the works probably a year ago. I reached out to Alberto because I think you have a beautiful story. You're somebody, and I'll let you get into it a little bit, but I was always inspired and looked at you guys as a whole family as something that I would like to achieve one day. And I just love your story. The times that I've spoke to Alberto and he's kind of told me a few things here and there, I'm like, you have a wonderful story. It's book worthy, you know what I mean, to even mention. But as we get into this interview, one of the quick questions that I ask all my guests is, who is Raphael?
Okay, so I'm an ophthalmologist. I'm practicing and I do surgery, cataract surgery, laser surgery for glaucoma. I got into medicine after I was 30 years old, and
Okay.
I used to be a physicist at Bell Labs, and I worked for Bell Labs, and they had me in a special program where they paid for your tuition, gave you 3 days off a week to go to graduate school. I went to NYU, graduate physics, and they would pay you a full salary. And Bell Labs is probably the place where I've met the smartest people in my life.
And when you say a physicist, can you tell us what that means? Like, what is that?
Okay, so a physicist is a guy that, as opposed to an engineer that builds things, so a physicist studies the basic laws of the universe, which is Newton's laws, F equals ma, Maxwell's equations, which govern electromagnetic theory,
Okay.
quantum mechanics, which governs the atom. And it gave me, a good background to be able, when I applied to medical school, one of the things that helped me was, so at Bell Labs, I had worked on radars. What we were working on was ballistic missile detection. And
Wow.
so you try to build algorithms and design, technology to detect them and shoot them down.
Right.
My second job in technology, I was able to write a paper that got published in a peer-reviewed journal, and that gave me like some credentials because I was able to get into a good medical school. And one of the things I had to present was that article that I had published. And there are a lot of very qualified students, but I don't think a lot of them had something like this on their resume.
Right.
So I'm very grateful to have been to work at Bell Labs. This is before they were broken up by the government.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I mean, it's a great opportunity, and you rise to the occasion, and that's a hell of an opportunity for you to be working and still have the opportunity to go to school while you're at it, and then pay for it. Yeah, that's a sweet story.
That was the Bell system, although it was a monopoly, they were able to keep very talented people because what they did was they recruited the best of the best from the universities, and they offered them this program. And the
Right.
ones who wanted to stay could stay, and the ones that didn't wanted to move on to another maybe better paying job could also do that. And I took advantage of that.
Now, Rafael, before we get into your practice and how you came about, how you found that, can you talk to us a little bit about your earlier years? You are from New York. How was that like for you in your more earlier days as a young man? And then how you came about even going to school and choosing the journey that you chose.
Okay, so I grew up in the South Bronx, the very tip of the Bronx. At that time was 130th and Brook. So at that time, the Puerto Ricans had basically primarily moved into El Barrio, which is 116th Street between Park and 3rd Avenue. And when all of that was filled up, the Puerto Ricans moved to the South Bronx, which was an Italian-Irish neighborhood, basically. So, we moved into that area was very tough. We had to, I can tell you my very first day in school, an Irish kid told me, "Hey, Spick, when you go back to where you came from?" And my uncle, who was in Okinawa just 3 years prior to that, he had been fighting in Okinawa as a ranger, an army ranger. And I told him, "Mira, tío, si me molestan los irlandeses," which means if I'm bothered by the Irish, what should I do? And he told
Right.
me, "Tú le dan la manzana aquí, lo mata." So when I got into it with George, I went for the sword. I punched him in the throat, but he didn't die.
Thank God, right?
So that was the kind, and it was the kind of thing where you couldn't, if you were a pure scholar, you didn't get pushed around. You had to be an athlete. I was lucky that um, I could, I could, was pretty good in in math, and
Okay.
I was also good and stickball. Some real talent. One of the guys, Artie Lopez, who played on the stickball team, made it to the New York Yankees. In
Oh,
six,
wow.
yeah, he won the batting championship at Richmond, the AAA of the AAA team for the Yankees. He came, stayed 1 year. He was already a little bit older. It's about 28, 29. Didn't have a great year, and the Yankees didn't think they could use him. So he finished his career as an all-star in Japan. So we had
Wow.
some very, very good talent there. And of course, guys like that around you, that's something that you strive for. So I would practice and, I could swing the bat pretty good.
And there's something to say about that too, because like, we hear so much about bullying today, right? That this goes on, and different people have different opinions of, whether this generation is tough or not. But having to deal with you being forced in a sense to move to the South Bronx, to a community that's not the same culture as yours, and then to kind of be tried to get bullied, right? They try to bully you and it didn't work out. Like, what do you think inside of you made you stand up for yourself? Because that's something that you probably, that instance is something that may have helped you in different walks of life.
Well, one of the things when my classmate George told me that, to my mind, I said, "Listen, I had an uncle that fought in Okinawa. I had
Right.
another uncle that was in D-Day. And you're going to tell me I'm not American? I was born here. I'm just as American as you." That's what in my mind. And I was going to teach him how wrong he was.
Right.
Punch him in the throat.
So, and then from there, right? Being that you moved to the South Bronx, like, how did you go from there? Where did the story go? Like,
Okay, so I went, I didn't make it to any of the specialized, a lot of people don't realize, for example, this administration thinks that, giving underprivileged people a chance to go to better schools, they have no idea just how inferior the education is. How could you, from that education system, how could you compete with someone that comes from schools in Queens, the nice
right,
Jewish neighborhoods where they stress education? Education was not stressed in these communities,
right,
unfortunately. So I had to work hard, and I think I had a gift for mathematics. Even now, at my age, in fact, this morning I practiced writing pi, the number pi, which is infinite.
yes,
Can do that above 3,000. Not everyone can do that. So I can do it.
wow.
I did it 3,080. I made 5 mistakes this morning.
Is that something that you do daily, or you just do it like once in a while?
A couple of times a week because it's like learning to play Rachmaninoff 3, which is a very, very complex piano piece. You
Right.
can do it once, but if you don't practice it, you're going to forget it. And then what my goal is to increase to
How
get to
far you go?
4,000.
Wow.
So I have only, I started this about when I was 70.
Okay.
I got up to about 40 and I thought that was a lot. And I just kept going.
And how do you do it? You write it on a piece of paper, or is just
Yeah, I write it down. So I have printed out up to 4,000. And I sit down and I write it. See, if I do it in my head, so you have to record it and then you go back and check it.
okay,
So it takes me, I start off fast. The first 1,000 I can do in about 11 minutes. And this morning I got them all right up to 1,500. And then you
nice.
start, sometimes you lose your concentration a little bit. You make little mistakes, but it helps keep me sharp. And, I try to do a lot of things. I shoot basketball. I do surgery. I do eye surgery. I do a few a month. The more things you do, the younger your brain stays. And that's crucial for me.
Yeah,
For
so
any,
it seems like you don't let yourself just kind of like just not even the word chill, but just
no.
you're
Listen,
challenging yourself to stay sharp. Exactly what you were saying.
yeah, yesterday, for example, I'm not going to work out today. So yesterday I got up, I did 40 minutes of sit-ups, 45 minutes on the Peloton. I did some lifting with weights. Did 6 sets with 25 each on each arm. And then I went up to 6 sets with 35 each on each arm. Then
Right.
I worked out for my legs. And today I'll just chill.
And
So
and Rafael, how old are you now? If you don't mind me asking, we could remove this if you don't want to answer it.
I'm 83.
And that is amazing. That is amazing.
If I make it to August, I'll be 84.
Well, August what? Well, when's your birthday? August.
11.
And my Leo's. My mom is a Leo. My wife is a Leo, and then my daughter. So I have nothing but Leos around me. So I'm kind of trained in that world of dealing with Leos. Are you into the horoscopes and then the whole?
I have Tony is the 13th. And
Oh
my
wow.
daughter is a third, right?
Okay. So
So, and
you
then my youngest son is the previous month, but he's on the cusp of being a Leo.
do you find that the personalities are a little bit like
Yeah,
certain
they're
traits?
all a little bit fiery. Tony is fiery. My daughter's fiery. I'm not
Okay,
saying
okay.
about me, but
And then, so going back to the story of, so what brought you into, so talk to us about, you went through high school. You did mention the current administration and how they're not giving the kind of the same opportunities that you probably received back then, which was very beneficial because that could have made or broken you back in those days because of the,
definitely. I went to City College. At that time, uh, it was free. You paid for matriculation, every semester, which is
right,
then, maybe it's $50 and you bought your books and that was it. And so I got basically a free education. And because I did well in my major, labs offered me that position that I mentioned because
not,
you had to qualify for that.
right,
And I went to Columbia Medical School, and when I was there, I took an elective in ultrasound. And at that time, what they were trying to do was to bypass the physical biopsy and pathology and instead use the ultrasonic waves to analyze a pathological lesion, determine the character of that lesion. But that's nothing but radar, right? Except the mathematics is the same. So I was, by the preceptor of that particular rotation told me, Raphael, here, read this paper. And it was basically very similar to radar. And I told him, listen, I can take this to the next level. And
oof,
I was lucky. I wrote it up, submitted by the department. It got accepted. They flew me out to San Francisco, and I was in front of a very big, prestigious meeting, and I presented my paper. So, again, when I went into ophthalmology, which is a highly desirable specialty, so I now had 2 papers. And in ophthalmology, I've also published 3 papers, and actually one where I didn't publish it, which is a new finding. And the finding is because, I am a very serious fisherman. So I caught my first blue marlin and I was intrigued. And of course, as an ophthalmologist, you ask, well, I wonder if they have color vision. Because the guys who are baiting all this stuff dress the natural bait with different colored skirts, yellow and green.
right,
So I was able to speak to Harvard Biological Labs, and they set me up with a little kit, fixation kit. So if I happen to catch a marlin, and I could harvest the retina, fix it with the kit, send it out to them ASAP, under ice. And indeed, they have color receptors. They have cones, and no one knew that.
wow,
So I didn't publish that, but I'm still waiting to do an ERG. An ERG is an electroretinogram, and what that does, it tells you what colors they see, whether they see the 3 primary colors Or are they colorblind? They could have cones, just like a lot of humans that are colorblind, but they're not wired to see what normally we consider normal color.
Right.
So still have to do that. And I hope
Uh,
I'll do it before, I run out of time.
Question for you on that, like the fact that you say you publish these things. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because we've had this conversation before, not specifically about this, but I was around when you published. I think you probably possibly your last one, and I always wondered because I know it's a thing, right? It's a very important thing, but like, what makes it? What is the importance of these papers? Where do they go? What are they used for once you do publish them?
Okay, so my first paper in ophthalmology is something called cyclovertical muscle palsy. Just I don't want to get too technical, but everyone knows about squint, right? You either eyes are turned in or eyes are turned out, wall-eyed, you're cross-eyed, right? But there's another one where the eyes are up or down. That's cyclovertical, and that's a lot more complicated to diagnose. And I came up with a way to do it very simply by drawing a diagram that I kind of developed and drawing lines. Now, academician, instead of going back, at that time you didn't have AI.
Right.
So instead of going back to the book, you could pretty much remember that diagram and just go bang, bang. And in 10 seconds, you have the diagnosis. That's useful for a clinician.
Right.
And, they test you on the boards for that. But I think clinicians would find that useful, to have
So
something which you
it's
don't see
something.
all the time.
Right. So
That's your
when it gets published, it goes kind of like into the books, right? Where this is now it's factual information that has been tested and that can be studied by other doctors.
Yeah,
Is
so
that
so JAMA is sort of like Newsweek, right? You get a Newsweek every month, right? And you look through it, and they have some articles that would
got
interest
it?
you. So this is the Journal of American Medical Association in Ophthalmology, and a good number of ophthalmologists subscribe to this. And they'll look down the heading of the papers, and if they want to look at it and read it and maybe cut it out and put it aside someplace where they could refer to it. It's an easy referral, to
Nice.
answer questions. You don't have to go through books and more. You don't see that cyclovertical palsies very often. What you see are either cross-eyed or walled-eyed. You tend the reason is the typical way to solve it is you have to. So there are a total of 8 muscles, 4 in the right and 4 in the left, involved in elevating and depressing the eye, and each of them have 3: a primary, secondary, and tertiary function. So you have to memorize 8 by 3, 24 pieces of information. And it's easy to get intorter from extorter back mixed up. But with the technique that I developed, it's a no-brainer.
That's awesome. That's amazing. What is it that causes, and now because we're going down that rabbit hole, what is it that you think causes people to have,
But if you
you
get an
know,
injury, let's say you get in a car accident, you get bumped your head, and one of the nerves is damaged. I recently saw a patient in my office that was punched in the face and he got knocked down. He partially lost his consciousness. Well, one of his eyes is slightly affected, doesn't, go out all the way. It's drifting outward. So he's wall-eyed. That's an exotropia. Since it only happened a few months ago, he may totally recover that. But sometimes you don't recover and it stays that way. But, it could have just as easily affected the elevation and depression of the eye. And then, if the surgeon thinks he needs to repair that, and you repair these problems with surgery, you have to compensate for the weakness in one eye, strengthen the muscle on that side to to correct the deviations.
yeah, I always wonder, like, because there's people, I guess, that may be born with some type of deficiency in the muscle, and then there's regular PI. It's one of those things where I always wonder. I'm like, why do people get fixed? Is it fixable? And I guess it's a case by case basis, right? Not all. There's potential that some of them can be, and there's others that there's no way around it. Would you say?
Yeah, well, The most common thing you see is cross-eyed wall-eyed. And a good number of the people that get this have C-sections. The mothers had C-sections. And why does that happen? Because if the surgeon tries to pull, the baby out, he's got rubber gloves. It's like holding onto a piece of glass that has oil on it. So what do? They get a forceps, a big forceps that's designed to grasp the head and pull the baby out. And especially when they cut into the womb, if they don't do it big enough, right, the baby doesn't just slip out. So there are a lot of factors.
Oh, wow.
An incision in the womb that's not big enough, a big baby, and it's hard to come out. So you have to take the baby out so you can repair the womb before the mom exsanguinates.
Right.
That womb is just bleeding. You can't believe just how much it bleeds.
Oof.
So you got to close it up quick before you lose the mom.
And in those cases, are you saying when they get the baby out, sometimes they may injure the baby's eye like that? Is that what it is?
They injure the head because the nerve runs through the head to the muscles, right?
Right.
And the muscles, for example, the muscles are just outside of this right here. So the muscles go in the cone of the eye, and if you squeeze, just might be able to squeeze. If you squeeze too high, the head is very soft in a baby. So you could squeeze it and injure the nerve just as a consequence.
Wow. Things that you would never guess. You would never guess.
And initially, you don't see it until maybe 6 months. The parent will pick it up.
Yeah. Wow. There's so much to be worried about when somebody is giving birth. That's one of the least things you think that something was, the baby was grabbed in a certain way. It's going to affect the eye because they can't even see, right? Until a couple days or weeks or something like that after
Well,
they're born.
Well, the vision doesn't develop until gradually. A newborn baby, the reason the strangers can pick them up and kind of play with them is because they really don't recognize things. They recognize motion at that
Right.
age. They can fixate and follow, right? But they can't really focus very well, and the visual cortex is not developed, and the visual tracts have not developed. The optic nerve comes in, crisscrosses right behind the pituitary and goes to either side of the visual cortex. And you don't see with the eye, you see with the brain. The eye just makes the image.
That's nuts. That's real quick to get back to a point in time. So you mentioned that you went to City College. You were able to work for, you said
Those telephone labs, Bell Labs.
Bell Labs. They put you through school. When did the family come into the equation? When when you met your wife and you had your kids? Because I believe the story is you were already a father while you were going to school, correct? Like you
Well,
were no?
I lived out in Jersey when I was at Bell Labs.
Okay.
And then I came back and I had a place in the Bronx, and I worked for this company that was part of Columbia University research labs, right? And finally, I decided that in technology was very difficult for me to get where I wanted to get to. The paper I published at this particular company, instead of being received with accolades, and the when the economy, and they cut a lot of defense spending. This was like 69. I was let go.
Okay.
And I was the only guy, it was a small company. I was the only guy who could solve a problem that they had. They were, again, flying ballistic missiles, and on re-entry, they saw something in the data they couldn't explain. And the only guy in the company, there were about 500 people in the company, was me. I wrote a paper and it got accepted in a peer review journal, but that didn't help me. So I decided I was going to leave technology, and I got a job as a director of a training program in East Harlem. I designed a recording studio, built it, developed a curriculum. I was involved in screening the applicants, and we took hardcore unemployables. We tested them. Their verbal and mathematical skills was no higher than third or fourth grade. But again, you would expect this because these kids grew up and were educated in these schools of inner city, like I was.
Right.
You would expect them not to know how to read and not to know very much math. We took them in and, they thought that we were magicians. They wanted us to bring them up to speed to the people in technology in recording studios in 6 months. That's all they gave us.
So to get somebody who has a third grade
To bring
like
them up to
education
someone
level,
who
okay,
was at a college level, right,
right.
is a sound engineer. That's not realistic. Those are not realistic expectations. We had, that was a really good job for me to learn more about what poverty does. It really disadvantages you because you don't have access to get education. And getting back to this administration that doesn't want to give, people of color a disadvantage in this country. I forgot to mention my dad was always a reader, he was only a porter, right? And the situation, he always stressed education, get an
Right.
education. And, he made it when I was going to city college, I would do some part-time work, but he didn't tell me, listen, we need more money. You have to go out and work. That would have made things even that more difficult,
Right.
because we were dealing. I also had an older brother who was a dealer and he
Right.
lived at home. And that
And
made
that's crazy to see the two walks of life. Like,
Yeah, so he was a dealer and the police would come and there were a lot of things that happened that I saw. So I had to make my decision very early on. I saw where he was going, right? And so I saw where I wanted to go. I was very, very focused.
that must have helped you too in seeing his direction, seeing the cops showing up to your house, or if if we're talking about a story that we see all the time where you're getting arrested, you're in and out of jail. You obviously knew you had some type of gift when it came to math and the things that you ended up doing now. Whereas like it was evident, like I definitely don't want to go this route.
When I worked as the administrator of that program in East Harlem,
Right,
so one of my staff, this guy comes around. He had just gotten out of Attica. He was a convicted felon. And I'd hired him as my English teacher because he was a jailbird, just like my brother was, my
right.
oldest brother. So I figured, maybe my oldest brother, no one gave him a shot. So I was going to give this guy a shot. And he was doing good. He was straight for 2 years and he was okay a few years after that. And I kind of lost contact with him. But, yeah, so it was a good, being able to see, and he was a very smart guy. He had good insight, but he just made some very bad decisions early in his life. And it's like a tree. If you go off too far, it's very hard to correct.
To bring you back, yeah, you get used to that lifestyle. And, it is sad. It is sad. Mostly so when you ended up at that job where you ended up building a curriculum for the recording studio. How did you ultimately end up where years later you have your own practice?
Okay,
How
so
did that happen?
so I was during this, I was applying to the medical school. And what I wanted to show was that I had left technology and that I was going into something that directly helped people.
So that was your overall objective, is like you just wanted to do something that you can help others with, right?
When I applied to medical school, I didn't want to be a researcher, even though I write papers, right?
Right.
Uh, And so I wanted to be a clinician. If you take a look at my practice, when you come into my office, I don't have a big staff. I measure you for your refractive error so I can prescribe glasses and then do a general examination. I tell you what's going on.
Right.
Nowadays, the young doctors have it's a different kind of style. They have a lot of staff and they have a lot more. I mean, I have instrumentation, but the general, years ago, you didn't need that instrumentation to look at retinopathy. So I do my general exam and I'll sit down, I'll explain to you what's going on. Where now the doctors are a little bit more pressed. Right now, the reimbursements are very low. So they have to see maybe triple the number of patients I see. Because they have to, they want to have a house and they have kids, right? And the reimbursements just, I'll give you an example. So in the early 80s, if you did a cataract for Medicare, you'd get about $2,200. Now you do a cataract for Medicare. If you don't sell a premium lens will sell about from $1,500 to $2,000, right? You will get paid around $550.
Wow.
And in inner city communities, most people can't fork out that money.
Right.
I don't think that the vision with what they call so-called premium lenses is as good as with a regular lens, because a premium lens is actually what they call a beam splitter, right? So they break up the beam of light into distance and near, for, let's say, for reading. And if you consider what astronomy 101, if you want to have a better picture of Mars, you build a bigger telescope, more gathering light. Gather less light, you get less information. So the premium lenses work pretty good when you have a lot of light. Once you start to get dimmer, the vision drops off. So one of the interesting things I find about ophthalmology today is that all of the advancements from LASIK to premium lenses decrease the optical performance. Because, for example, in LASIK, you get spherical aberration, which deteriorates the vision, the image. The modern, now we're doing what? We're doing 4K and
Yeah.
HDR. All of that is more resolution. So with the newer corrections of vision, you lose that because you won't be able to see it.
So if somebody gets LASIK surgery, and this conversation I slightly remember where I think you're licensed to do it, but you choose not to.
That's right. I got trained, but I wouldn't do it on myself, and I wouldn't do it on my kids. And if I wouldn't do it on my kids, who are all nearsighted, I'm not going to do it on someone else.
Right.
I don't. It's ethical just to take their money and do something that I don't think is good for their eye. One of the things that they don't touch on is that a risk for glaucoma is a thin retina, and when you have LASIK, they make your cornea thinner.
And with that, if you get glaucoma, what is that? Is that where there's like a cloud that comes in front of where
No,
you can
that's
actually?
cataract. So
That's a cataract. Okay.
glaucoma is when there's optic nerve damage.
Okay.
You start losing your peripheral vision. So, and if you get it advanced, it's like looking down a tunnel. And then if you don't correct it, that tunnel gets narrower and narrower and narrower.
Mm.
Then you don't see anything. You might see light. A sharp image is determined by the amount of black that you have. The purer the black, the more contrast the image. What happens with spherical aberration is that you only get the correction in the middle center, the best correction in the middle center of the cornea. As you go off to the side, the correction drops off. What does that mean? That means that those rays of light are still myopic. They focus in front of the retina. And it's like having unfocused light. Think of what happens if you're in a movie theater and someone opens the side doors, emergency exits. You get all of that light going in. Well, how
Right.
does the image look? Well, it starts to wash out because the blacks start to go away. And even the other colors start to go away. You
Wow.
get bright light on them, they get washed out. And that's an over-exaggeration in LASIK, but that gives you an idea of what happens to LASIK. Years ago, one of my residents that I was training in cataract had gotten LASIK. And he told me the surgeon that did it, and he told him, "Oh, you're wonderful. You're seeing 2015, marvelous." And he told him, "But I don't see sharp." And of course, you're not going to see sharp.
So when
Because
you say C sharp, there's a little bit of a blur in images. Is that what it is?
when you look at a sharp image, let's say you look at the at the vision chart, it's black on white. When you see it sharp, you see the letters are black and you see them, on that white background. That's sharp vision. When you see them soft, there's kind of a gradation. You don't see a sharp edge to them. They get a
Wow.
little blurred. That's in black and white. And so in color, it's the same thing, that it's not quite as sharp. So you lose visual performance from LASIK. Now, what happens over time is that the brain gets used to seeing that way. So it doesn't, at the beginning, it bothers you.
And
But
then you
if
get
you
used to it.
wait a time, then it doesn't bother you. But that doesn't mean that you're seeing sharp.
Right.
Just brain adjusted. Because I get people with, I bring them in and, oh, I see good until you have them read the eye chart. 90% of the people, at least, maybe more, go back to glasses after a while. And one of the reasons is, if you remember, the eye has pressure. So it's like a tire, right? But a tire has air pressure, an eye has pressure from the liquid, the aqueous. And that's important because you have to, in order to have good vision, the distances between the optical surfaces have to remain constant. If you change them, you change the point of focus. If the cornea is round like this, and you make it thinner in the center, well, that pressure produces a strain, right? And for those of you that don't know what strain is, if you take a bar and elongate it by delta L, a little amount, and divide that by the length, that number is called strain. So if you make it thinner, that pressure is going to increase the strain because it's now a thinner bar. And so what'll happen is that cornea will rise up and curve a little more. When it curves a little more, you lose a little of your correction because the initial correction was to make the cornea flatter if you're nearsighted. That's why most people, after a while, have to get a touch-up. Now, if you get a touch-up, that's about the
Even
worst
more.
thing you could do.
Yeah.
Why? First of all, one of the things that happens with LASIK is that you cut the cornea. You cut the cornea, the most sensitive organ tissue in your body. You cut the corneal nerves that go to the blink center. The blink center is now not all the nerves attach normally. So you're going to blink less because the blink center gets less input. You blink less, what's going to happen? You have to get a dry eye.
Yeah, yeah.
If the doc says, hey, you need a touch-up, he doesn't cut again because that flap that he cuts never heals. He goes to the edge, he lifts it up. Then he applies a little laser to flatten it because what has happened is that your cornea has gotten a little bit rounder. So he flattens it again, makes it thinner. So he hasn't really solved the problem that you have. He's going to make the cornea thinner and then he's going to put the flap back on. Now, so you're going to get even more nerves that are going to not reconnect. And on top of that, the pressure is going to be the same, but you're now going to have a thinner cornea. So it's going to get to the point, it's going to come back faster and deeper.
You're gonna have people that don't even blink at one point.
What'll happen is that the next time you go there again, doc, I need more. He says, I can't do it. It's too thin.
Right.
So you're going to be
Wow.
stuck with the worst.
Yeah, I remember. Were you gonna do a paper on that as well? Did you ever
That's
publish
in the
anything?
horror treatment.
Of course, because I mean you're, and then this is me just talking a lot. It's almost like you're bashing a whole industry and tons of money that they make on doing LASIK. So why, it's one of those things. I remember having I used to do Uber in the city when I lived up in New York, and I had somebody from the pharmaceutical industry. We were talking, and I just asked, there's no such thing as a stupid question, but I feel like this was a stupid question. I asked them, if they had a cure for a disease like lupus, arthritis, cancer, these things, why wouldn't they put it out? We have so much technology nowadays, so much data. And he's like, why would you mess up a repeat customer?
Well, that's what oxycodone is,
Hmm.
right? That was involved with all of these deaths in Appalachia, right?
Right.
They were promoting it as non-addictive. They had data. The FDA got involved and they let them put a label that it was not addictive. And that was the FDA's, they're supposed to look out for
Yeah, for all of us.
for all of us, for safety for medicine, right? And so they didn't do anything. And they kept selling more and more. I don't know how many thousands of people died from that. And the
Yeah.
Sackler family became very, very wealthy from that. And they promoted it until, and so many people died. And, they said they made an adjustment, a payment for in billions, the penalties,
Right.
but they did it so they could retain a good portion of their wealth. So they're billionaires.
Yeah.
And they did it with this blood money. They didn't care.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's scary. Like especially nowadays, like talking about those type of drugs, and nowadays it's because when I grew up, it's like people were either addicted to heroin or they were addicted to crack or one of those things. Now it's these pills that you really can't tell what any like people are on, but it's ruining families. People are becoming addicted. People are losing their lives.
The
But
more
it's
potent than the heroin, let me tell you.
look at that.
Oxycontin is more potent than, the synthetics are just more potent and more addictive.
My mom is still up in the neighborhood in Washington Heights, and she always tells me like, when somebody passes away or something like that, and I'm like, I mean, nowadays you can't tell what people are on because all they're doing is popping a pill. Before you would see in the street the syringes and stuff, but now it's a pill, it's a liquid, powder, whatever it is. So it's scary. Raphael, going back to a part that I mentioned that it was very inspirational for me, is how did your family life come into the equation? Like, you had a successful career in school, you kind of shifted professions once or twice. When did that come about? When did the family come full circle for you?
Well, okay, so, I got married a little bit later, right?
Okay.
And what happened was, so the program at Columbia Medical School gave you one summer off. That was the first year. You do the basic science, you have that summer off. And what had happened was I been talking to some of my friends, and we decided we were going to go meet in Cali, Colombia, right? So we had Cervoni, who came from Puerto Rico, Rich, and he brought his brother, and Rich Rohrer, which is another medical student. We met in Cali, and then we took a bus and we just went down. We went to Quito, spent a few days there, then went to Guayaquil in Ecuador.
Right.
And then from Guayaquil, we went to Galapagos, came back, headed and went all the way back to Cusco and Machu Picchu. We were traveling on,
You were down there.
we were down for weeks, and we were traveling the way the locals travel, right?
Yeah.
Staying in places the local stayed. And when we got to Machu Picchu, they said, "Hey, we want to see the reed-dwelling Indians of Lake Titicaca." Now, I'm a guy from the South Bronx, and the life in South America is totally different. I didn't
Right.
speak that much Spanish, and I didn't really like their buses. And I told the guys, "Listen, if you guys want to see the Indians in Lake Titicaca, that's great. I'll see you in September. I'm heading home." I got on a bus, traveled some nonstop 39 hours to Lima because we went through the Atacan Desert. I mean, it's terrible. And so I took another bus and I was heading to Cali, right? Got a shower, rented a $5 room, took a shower to clean up, put on a new set of clothes, went down to the bus terminal, got on the next bus, met a couple of Americans there. And the reason you met them, knew they were Americans, because there was every now and then they had these stops for security in Peru, and they wanted anyone that's a stranger, that's a foreigner, had to present documentation. I met a guy Avedisian from Connecticut, another guy from Missouri. And then we got to the border of Ecuador and Peru, and I said, "I can't go any further, guys." It'd been almost 70 hours, and you don't sleep. And I said, I can't continue. One of the guys said, "Whatever you do, don't stop here. This is a terrible town." So I went, continued, stopped in Quito, got a night's rest. The guy from Missouri stayed there. I continued with the guy from Connecticut. And when we got to Cali, I said, "I want to go there to I had an open ticket with an airline, Aero Condor. Doesn't exist anymore, right? They don't
Right.
fly every day." And I sat down and I find out I can't fly for like 3 days. And I sit next to this real pretty girl. And I started a conversation with her. And I said, "Hey, do you have the time?" "Yes, this is the time." Well, takes out her watch. And then I said, "Listen, I'm new in town and my Spanish was very bad. Maybe you can show me around." So she gave me a smile, gave me her address. I go the next day. And so to make a long story short, last July, I celebrated my 50th anniversary with her.
Wow. Congratulations on that. That's amazing.
So, I went back in Christmas, right? And I said, I have to marry this girl. But I knew that if I didn't marry her soon, that wouldn't work out. So I asked her, I told her, I want to marry you. And of course, she got very nervous. Cold passed through her body.
Right.
Cold fear passed through her body. I came back in March, got engaged, married in July 13th. That's in the middle of medical school. And, she had to learn English. She didn't know how to learn English. And my family embraced her. She came from a totally different, she had 9 brothers and sisters, never didn't speak any English. That was a big jump for her.
That's amazing. That's a story within its own that deserves its own episode because
Within this story.
like not to go into mine, but like I met my wife at I was working at AT&T in a retail store on 95th and Broadway. She came in for an interview. I was single, and that's all she wrote. I mean, I remember she came in and I told the guys there, I'm like, I got dibs. This. And then I met her. She was sweet, and it's one of those things where it sounds very like cliche, but like when you know. And with her, it was just it felt peaceful. And we're gonna have next month. We'll have 12 years married,
Oh,
and in
congratulations.
July we'll have 15 years together, and it's been the best. It's been a journey, but like yourself, like you and I've seen the unity between you and your wife, the way you guys are in church. They say you're equally yoked and what you've built together, and you're on the same page. And I took a page from your book when it comes to that too, and just observing you guys, because I didn't grow up in that type of household, I always admired seeing something that actually functions, right? Like seeing how, because dysfunction is normal in my neighborhood and in most, inner city neighborhoods. Like that's the norm. So when I
That's a,
finally saw something that seemed like there was structure and it was together and it was right and it was peaceful, there wasn't turmoil, it was normal conversations. And then I see Berto and your other kids. I'm like, if this is what normal looks like, this is what it should be like. And I'm not saying that everybody has problems, everybody has disagreements, but it's the action that you take towards it that really matters, right? Are you going to create this whole big commotion? And that's something that I had to learn within myself too, of having the patience and our, love, like leading with love, where ultimately is like we're on the same team. So for us to go into this whole fight about things, and when I say fight, it's like the stuff that I saw growing up. It's all pointless because we're together. We're a team. If something hurts you, it hurts me, and I want to see you do the best. So it's wonderful to hear your story and then see it 50 years later that you guys are still together, and it's still like it's so powerful. And that's something like again, and I always talk about it. Every time I talk to Berto, I ask how you're doing, and he always tells me you're doing great, which is always awesome to hear. But I always tell him like I love your dad. Like I'm like your dad probably barely remembers me or doesn't know me too well because I've only met you I think 2 or 3 times tops. But it's that lasting impression of seeing even the way you treated me when I went to your house when you were wearing an apron and you were barbecue like that, Raphael. I took that with me, and I do that here in my house. I'll throw on a little apron, I get the tunes going, like, and it's just such a beautiful thing to have like that feeling that I felt when I went to your home, you know. And I know I went off to another tangent, but I just want you to know, like, and even the viewers, like, you'll be surprised who can influence you with just a few moments of their time and how that can impact you long term. And then in your case, I always say something on my podcast that I say, shoot your shot. Always, if you're leading with love and with good intention, and in your case, you were in the same place in the right time, you shot your shot, and we're 50 years later, you guys are celebrating that you're married together. That's beautiful.
Yeah, we in the office, I'm part of my wife takes care of the glasses. She was an RN,
Okay.
and I told her, RN is pretty good, but I think you can become an optician, and you could come in and you call your own shots, and you have your own little store. So I encouraged her to do that, and she did it, and she's very happy there. And so, we're together. Like she's on
Right.
one part of the office, I'm in the other side, but we don't get tired of each other. She's my best friend.
Hey,
She.
Rafael, don't make me cry. And the reason it hits home for me is because people always ask me that question where they're like, do you work? Because my wife works from home full time, and I had 3 and 2. I worked 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. It's like, wait, don't you get tired of each other? And I'm like, I don't. If I could have it my way, like the way you have it, my wife would be wherever I'm at all times. And not because I'm afraid that I'm gonna do something negative. It's not even that. It's, I genuinely love her company. She's funny. She makes me laugh. We talk about anything and everything. Every time, like it's just I would much rather be with my wife all the time. And then like in hearing you say it, that's one of the keys to your success.
I tell my wife, so I can still make you laugh. We're driving into the city and I'll crack a joke about, and she'll crack up and I tell her, see, I can still make you laugh. And so
Yeah,
we can laugh together.
yeah.
We always find a comment and we have different interests in this in the way that like movies, for example. I grew up on sci-fi, horror, and she wants drama, and she put up with some of my horror films, and so over the years, she got me to go
To
the
switch
other
over.
way. So you kind of split. You said, now, I don't know if this drama is my cup of tea. I know this, like she doesn't like real hard violence. That's not,
Yeah, yeah.
I've kind of attenuated some of the things. So, we've developed a symbiotic relationship in a sense that, what helps her, I've sort of kind of support what she likes.
You keep feeding into her. Do you think like if you had one piece of advice to give couples, right? And then usually people say younger couples. It could be anything because you could meet the love of your life at 40 years old. What would be one piece of advice that you would give anybody to have
Okay.
a successful marriage?
As a guy, do whatever it takes to make your wife happy. And that's hard because guys are wired a different way.
Right.
I take a look at my granddaughter and my grandson. Tony's into cars and this and that, and little Angela is into doing something else. So guys have to learn how girls, how they view the world, and you have to, and they're more intuitive. They're have a more into feelings, and guys are more abstract. I mean, I get that's why I'm good in math, right? I can look at things abstractly.
Yeah.
And so I've learned, I picked all her jewelry
Right.
and she's pretty happy with that. And I picked up a few dresses,
Right.
earlier in I could pick out something that I could visualize. And, I would go into Saks or Macy's and I already had an abstract image of what I was looking for. So if you take a look at women, I think the vendors know that most women are not very analytic. So they can throw a lot of stuff at them. And it's sort of like what sardines do to predators, right? They just have this mass of motion and they can't single out the one that they want to get. So it's very confusing.
Right.
Whereas if you have a mental image of what you're looking for, you can be very efficient. And so the few times that I've done it, I've been successful. She's been happy. I
That's
don't do
awesome.
it.
That's one thing. That's one thing I'll say too. That and I agree with you because my wife is she loves like the do it yourself projects right around the house, even the board that you have across your wall, right where it changes colors there, where I'm doing picture frame paneling in the house. And the reason that I picked up handiwork is because she's not forced me, but because it makes her happy. I had to learn how to do it. And now I know how to do it. And it's something that, like she told me earlier today, she's like, I love that you allow me to just do the things and then ultimately she's making our house a home and continue to pour into it by doing the things that she wants to do. It's exactly that. It's like what they say, and I know it's somewhat of a joke, but it's the truth. Happy wife, happy life. And ultimately it doesn't take a lot, and I don't know if you share the same sentiment as me. For a man, I don't feel like it takes a lot to make us happy, right? And not to say that nothing bad about, but with them, I feel like there's more features. The thing that you said about just having all these different things where they're still not sure what happiness looks like. For us, I'll be happy having, a beer that I never had in my backyard looking at the water, and I'll be fine. Whereas she's sitting there next to me and she's thinking about the wall, what frame to hang up, and I'm just like, oh my God, okay, we'll go tomorrow.
At this stage of life, I enjoy the very simple things. So I have a 70 Camaro
Yeah,
and
I saw it in the Porsche.
get out and have a Porsche. and I listen. I don't have to go really fast to enjoy it. When I was a young man, I was in a tremendous amount of hurry. I would go fast, but now I listen to the gears, the subtle things, feeling the transmission. And to me, that's very enjoyable. I do a little photography and I
Right.
have a set of lenses. They are legacy lenses from film camera. When I go out on my trips, I shoot film. I don't shoot. Digital has a place. The cameras in cell phones are very, very good. But if you take Ektachrome and blow it up to make a picture, I don't think you can beat that. It's digital looks it's too perfect. The photography, the medium of photography is not a drawing. It's closer to digital, but it's not digital. It has a little error and it has a subtlety and a beauty that if you can pick up on, you cannot really compare it to digital. So I shoot. That's why I still shoot my film.
Do you review your own films, or do you take it somewhere to get?
No, you take it to a lab.
Okay. Yeah, I was because of the profession you're in. I was wondering too if you had an eye for photography, where you know what I mean, because you're so versed in that world that it might be beneficial when you're out there shooting film.
So I've taken pictures of. I had an 8x10 of a very famous Spider-Man where he's jumping and shooting a spider web sort of like this, and he's in the city. And I took it with my 300. I have an old 300 vintage from the 1970s. And I enlarged it to poster size, and you can tell that isn't a real poster from
Mm,
something. That I do that, and I shoot. Wide angle gives you an opportunity to change the perspective of things, and so it, you can see it from a totally different point of view, and you can I took a picture of a puddle in Yellowstone Park with vapor in the background, and it looks like you're in a spaceship
oh, I would love to see your stuff.
approaching a planet that has this clouds around it.
So do you do that too? You see the way you said with your wife, where you'll go get her something and you already have an image in mind of what you're looking for. Is it the same thing when you're doing photography, where there's a shot that you have in mind that you want to grasp, or is it a thing of the moment where you just see it?
Well, I could look at something and then I could start to shoot. Film now has gotten very expensive. So now a roll of film will run you, 5 rolls of Ektachrome will run you $80, $90.
Oh wow.
Before it was a lot cheaper. I would go on a trip. I'd shoot 30 rolls just to experiment. 30 rolls would be close to 1,000 pictures. And, I'd take my wide angle and I'd start to shoot and I could see what it could do. And that's the only way that you can see how you could change perspective and
Mhm.
how, you can change the relationship between shapes and sizes. So you practice that. Probably the most creative lenses that I have are the wide angles. I have a 20, a 24. A telephoto is just a telephoto. Even with that, you can do certain things. If you open the diaphragm all the way out, you can blur the background,
Yeah,
and you can get shapes that add another component to the picture. You have in the foreground the image that you're interested in, and then there's the background you have. They call it the bokeh, which is these uh, background colors and shape,
right.
and that you can always do that. I mean, there's an awful lot of things you can do in photography.
Yeah, I love photography. I have well, it's a digital camera. It's a Sony, and I have a wide angle lens on it. That's what I use to shoot my podcast too. It's
Cool.
a 1.8 and 11 millimeter, I think it is. So it's awesome, especially for shooting like a show like this. If I have people live, you get to see everything, and then I mess around with blurring the background. But pretty much blurring the background it gives it so much more depth and like character to it, which is pretty awesome.
Yes, it does.
Rafael, I want to wrap this up because I know I took more time than I said, but is there anything else that you would like to just offer anybody who's listening or viewing this? This will be on all streaming platforms, or it'll be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast. I just want to soak up everything you're talking about because you have a world of knowledge. Anything you want to give off to the viewers?
Yeah, just the last thing I want to say, the faith and the spiritual life has also played an important part of my life. One of the reasons I was able to avoid a lot of the temptations has been that I had to prevent falling into a lot of traps. And life is, a life of faith. And the only thing I would tell young people is that they are attached to the digital world too much. And there's a lot more beyond that. Just remember this. There's something called entanglement in physics. And entanglement can't be explained. And it's something that if you were a god designing the universe, that you would put in there in order for you to have access at any point in the universe with whatever you want to. That distance and time is not a limiting factor. And so I would ask young people to not limit themselves to this digital world that most young people hide in and restrict themselves to. There is a spiritual life, and find it, reach out there. If you reach out for that spiritual life, you'll find it. Very important. The reason I bring this up, I just want to say one last thing. So my daughter was trying to conceive, right? And we went, this is a number of years ago, we went out to California to celebrate. They were going to implant the sperm of the eggs that they had harvested. Well, something happened, and that morning the eggs disintegrated. There was no fertilization. So we were all heartbroken. And I remember she went out, she had IVF one more time, didn't tell us. And this time they couldn't harvest, didn't find any eggs. And the doc said, listen, my dear, I think you're going into menopause. I think just about forget about it. So she called me, and she was really heartbroken. And I told her, listen, honey, you have tried everything modern science has had to offer.
Right.
And it's time to walk a different path. Go find the person that prays for healing. I came from Pentecostal church, so I told her, find a Pentecostal. Let her pray for you. She found a lady out in East LA, prayed for her. I wasn't there, so I don't really know what she said or what she did. And at the end of the session, my daughter said, how much do I owe you? And she said, I don't charge for doing God's work.
Right.
2 weeks later, she was pregnant. This coming June, we will celebrate Gija's 6th birthday.
That's beautiful.
That is, someone may run out with a problem that, science, medicine, or whatever doesn't have a solution, but you have to walk a path of faith where you don't try to control things by your mind, by your willpower. You have to be a lot more humble. You
Right.
have to kind of let things go.
I would
It's like
say,
Job, just listen.
yeah,
When he was kind of attacked by his friends, and he didn't hear God's voice until there was a whirlwind and it was a whisper. So don't listen for God to scream to you. It'll be a whisper. You have to be quiet and submit yourself to that. And that's all. That's pretty much what I have to say about that.
that's beautiful. If I may, what I will add is two or three things. So I'm huge into spirituality. Church is something that I watch online, not all the time. But when I moved down to Florida, I became very into Christianity and reading the book, like some of the books in the Bible. Ultimately, is learning for me to submit to God and knowing that exactly what you said is we're really not in control. We can do what we can with what we have, but even that has a limit. Where submitting, I fought that for a long time up until I realized that I'm not really in control and that I was trying to walk this journey in life by myself when I didn't need to. And that's something that I try to tell everybody. And you know how it is sometimes when you talk to somebody who's completely, blocked out of anything that relates to spirituality, religion, or God, they don't realize it at the moment. But I know how far I've gotten in my journey in life, the things that I've battled, and the blessings that I've had as well. in my belief in God, me praying and just submitting and knowing that everything is gonna be okay. And I'm like you mentioned during the podcast that there was a point in time where you lost the position that you were in, and ultimately we know what happens because you have your own practice now. But I'm in a crossroads right now where I was recently laid off from work, wasn't expecting it. And of course, you take a shot, it kind of knocked me down for a second, but I know there's a plan at hand, and I have to be ready to rise to the occasion and continue to my work. It's okay to pray and believe in God, but you also have to put in the work so
Hmm.
that when the opportunity, like in your story, presents itself, you're ready to go. And I think that's powerful as well. And that's one of the things. The third thing I'll say is the power in prayer is so important because once you're really devoted and you really believe in the prayer that you're saying, you'll feel it. You'll feel that warmth I've felt before, and it's not like a real thing, but not that it's somebody putting a quilt over me, but I've felt the comfort of prayer, almost like the equivalent of somebody putting a blanket when you're cold and you feel lonely around you. And that's something that I can't give you that feeling, but like you said, like it's something that you have to go out and find for yourself and spend that time either reading the Bible or just getting close to God through prayer. But I'm so glad and happy that you even mentioned that because I think it's huge. One of the things,
Thing that's crucial, really. That's made the difference in my life.
yeah. And yeah, and like I said, I'm going through something right now, but I'm so optimistic. I know my worth, my value, the things that I do. Like, I put this on the last pop, but just for the conversation's sake, like I lost my job and I went right into going into the skills that I know, setting up my window cleaning business and doing things like that because I know I have to keep it going. I have a family that relies on me, and the journey doesn't stop here. And this is only creating another stepping stone for me to figure something else out where maybe I was at the company that I was at for too long. And this is the only way that God could see me out of it, where it's like, dude, on to the next thing.
One door closes, another opens.
Right.
That's how you have to look at it.
The last thing I'll say is the little voice that you mentioned the other day. I went through this whole presentation for a job that I was going for, and ultimately I didn't get it. I did the best I could. I rehearsed the PowerPoint presentation. I did all the things for prep that you could think of. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm just saying I prepared as much as I could. And the morning that I felt like I was going to get the call, I heard a little voice and it said, unfortunately, we decided to go a different route. And I heard it almost like it was my wife telling me. And that's exactly what when the manager called, that was one of her first words that she said. Unfortunately, we decided to go a different route. And although I was bummed out, it was a load off of my chest where I was like, okay, this is not the route that I'm supposed to continue trying to chase onto. Now I can breathe. Now I get it, God. So that's where I'll leave that. But Raphael, thank you so much. My love to you and your family. I have nothing but admiration and respect for you and your family. I love that you were able to say yes to jumping on the show. I know that I've spoken to Berto a little while ago, but we finally made it happen. And this will be out this Wednesday. So it'll be out fairly soon. I'll send you over the link so that way you can take a look at it when you can. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Amazing, amazing. And thank you. Best of luck to you. And we'll be in touch.
Okay.
Take
Take
care of
care.
yourself.